So I'm going to talk about Google Analytics best practices, or analytics in general best practices. And first of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about snooker. I know that we are in the UK and some people like snooker, especially as we had the World Championship just this week. And one of the things, I was born in Brazil, and back then when I was a teenager, that's the way we thought about snooker, right? It's a place where you go to smoke and drink beer, and it's, you know, playing snooker is just to kill the time, and that's what we thought. And just, I'm gonna...
Paul Newman, Tom Cruise, in a Martin Scorsese picture.
He's got the eye, he's got the stroke, he's got the fling.
Vincent's the best.
We got a racehorse here, a thoroughbred. You make him feel good, I teach him how to run. I'm not your daddy, I'm not your boyfriend, so don't be playing games with me. I'm your partner.
So that's the way I thought about snooker, and then a new chapter started in my life. I moved to Israel, and I got married. And my brother-in-law, that's him, he's a professional snooker player. And lately he started teaching us how to play snooker. And there are some amazing things in this game, and it's a very smart game, and you need a very special technique, and you need to understand the physics about the game and how to pocket balls. And you can also make, I don't know how many of you know this, Mr. O'Sullivan. He has been the champion for the last, I think, 5 years. And he won £7.5 million, just professional games. But not all of us can be professional snooker players, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how to use analytics in a professional way, so as opposed to using it as an amateur and, you know, going to play snooker just to kill time. I'm going to talk about being a professional snooker player using analytics. So first, I'd like to talk about web analytics. What's the overall objective of analytics? And I like this chart. It's from the 90s. A friend of mine, Jim Stern, and he's also the owner of the eMetrics Summit. And what I think, as you can see, it goes from top left to bottom right, and you can see the three dotted lines. First one is acquisition, persuasion, and then conversion. So what we see on the top left chart is that, you know, we are acquiring lots of people, and they're very untargeted. So we don't manage to persuade them to, you know, to look at the app or to sign up or to buy something on the website or app. And then, as you understand better the customers, you can convince them to get deeper into the product and maybe purchase something from the website. And the last one, you can see that maybe you have less people, but they're much more targeted, so you're bringing the right people to the website. Now, this is a web analytics process that I like to use, and I think it's a good one. And I emphasize that it's a web analytics process. It's not the web analytics process. So basically what we need to do is, first of all, we need to define the goals of the website, and that's not as simple as it might seem. I mean, sometimes, you know, the website is about selling something, so selling is the ultimate objective, so the macro goal. And then there are all kinds of micro goals, which is, you know, getting people to sign up for a newsletter, getting people to follow you on Google+. And then once you define the goals, you start defining the KPIs, which are the key performance indicators. So they are the numbers that you'll use to measure if you're succeeding with your goals or not. And once you have those two things, you can start collecting the data. So people usually, they start from collecting the data, and then they look at what they're collecting. So first of all, defining the goals, then building KPIs, and collecting the data. Once you have all the data, you start analyzing it. Sometimes you'll start analyzing, and then you'll go back to collecting because you don't have everything you need. After you analyze, you have to do something with it. So usually the best way to proceed is, you know, building a test, an A/B test, and then testing different alternatives, see which one is better. Once you do that, you implement the changes, and then you can go back to analyzing or revisiting the whole process. So that's more or less, the analytics process that you should think about. But, as a startup, I think it's very important to understand that you need to use the process that works for you. So sometimes, you might go look at the data first of all and see what you have and what you can do with it, and then, can start thinking about the analysis. So I'm going to talk about 4 principles that I think every company should keep in mind when they use Google Analytics. And they're very important for everything you do when measuring the website. So the first one, trends. So this is a data point, and a data point is not very useful, right? So if you know that yesterday you had 5,000 visitors and they bought, 10,000 pounds in revenue, it's not very useful. So you need to see, you need to compare how it's growing, right? Is it growing or is it going down? And that's a very important thing. And if you are in a seasonal business, like travel, for example, you should compare, not only see if it's growing, you should also see if it's growing as opposed to the same season last year. So if you look at summer, for example, you can't compare summer to winter, right? So you should compare summer to less summer. That's a very important point. Now, this is Ernest Hemingway. There's nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self. So it's very important. Lots of people, they are always trying to compare themselves with others. And I think the first thing should be to compare yourself to what you have been last year or before. And now, thinking about trends, I think trends is very good and it's very important, but trends is not enough. So you should also look at segmentation, and meaning, so if you're looking at how my website grew in the last 3 months, you should also drill down into what kind of segments drove this growth. So there are 2 types of segmentation. And the first one is top-down, and the second one is bottom-up. Right? So top-down personas is something that you decide, the management decides, and then tells everyone to do what they decided. And then there is the data-driven, which is, the analyst discovers a pattern in the data and then tells everyone about it. So the analyst is, usually the lowest you can get in the organization. Now, personas, just to talk a little bit, basically what we do is you sit down and you think about what kind of people you're trying to target. So let's suppose I'm trying, my users should be someone like, Daniel, a fictional person. He commutes from Cambridge to London every day. He reads his email on the train, and he reads The Guardian. And then you start, you give a picture to this persona, and you start creating people that you want to target them, right? So there's Daniel, and then there's James, and there's Jonathan, or other people. And once you do that, you can create a website based on that. And we know that there are 4 main types of personas. So there is logical, impulsive, caring, and aggressive. So logical are people that they're looking for information, so they want to know everything there is to know about the product. They're impulsive people, so if they see something nice on the website, they will just buy right away. There is caring people, which is people that care about what other people say, right? And aggressive people that they're just looking for the best deal. So we know, for example, that Apple, they are in the upper side of this chart, so they're very logical because they provide you lots of information about their products, and impulsive because they design the website so that people, they will feel good about it and they'll purchase something. And Amazon is on the bottom of this chart, which is, they have ratings and reviews which people use a lot to buy products, and they're very aggressive in terms of pricing. Now, if we talk about data-driven, which is, what we analysts, we do, is analyzing the data and trying to find patterns that will give you information to make to provide a better experience to your visitors. So on Google Analytics, we have the segment builder, which is, so if I start seeing that, people coming on Saturdays and from the United States, they have a very high conversion rate and they're spending lots of money on the website. So I should take this segment and start optimizing the website for them, right? So everyone that comes from the United States on Saturdays should get a specific website, personalized website. All right, so that's segmentation. Abhor averages. So a person that eats 6 meals one day and 0 the next day, and a person that eats 3 meals one day and 3 the other day, they both have a 3-meal average a day, but of course, it's not the same thing. And so never ever look at aggregate data. So every time that you log into Google Analytics, you should definitely look into segments of your customers so that you understand what is good for each of them and what's bad for each of them, so that you can optimize the website or personalize the website for your visitors. Now, something that is really important on Google Analytics is context, right? So we have a way to annotate the data, right? So you have this data, you can see a spike on the chart, and what happened on that day. So of course, that if it was a week ago, I can look for someone and just find out what happened last week, that we have this huge spike. But if it happened, so if I'm looking at last year's data, so I won't know what happened that day, especially, for example, if there was an offline event, right? If you presented on a big conference or something. Of course, if it is, there was a post on TechCrunch about the website, you can find that on the data, because your people referring traffic to your website. But if it was an offline data, or maybe there was a hosting problem, and not in this specific one, but if you have a down day, you could write, for example, that the server was down. So those are things that you can't see on the data. Now, another way to enrich the data, to provide context, so if I have this website, Banana Republic, right, and I'm selling clothes, and as you can see here, they have a customer ID. By the way, a default implementation on Google Analytics, you would see just, which page you're in and what happened on this page, how long people stayed on that page, what was the bounce rate of this page, and this kind of information. Now, there is a whole lot more to learn about this page, right? And what Banana Republic, they have, for example, they have different types of models. So they have a white model, they have a black model, and they have an Asian model. So there are 3 people. And then they have shirts where the default is black, and shirts where the default is gray. And they have shirts for men, shirts for women, of course, and all kinds of information. Now, what we can do, we can take this customer ID, and of course, I have this customer ID in my database, right? And with all these characteristics that I'm talking about. And now what I can do, I can upload this table into Google Analytics, and then I'll have all the information available to make decisions. And then suddenly I'll be able to answer questions like, what's the conversion rate of this model? What's the conversion rate, for example, of piqué shirts as opposed to vintage shirts? And should the default be black or gray, right? So I can start answering more interesting questions based on website behavior and the information that I have on my database. So this is a very good way to enrich the data in Google Analytics. And you can upload also anything that you have in your CRM into Google Analytics using dimension widening. So that's a very important feature to keep in mind. Now, cross-data upload. Some people, for some reason, they use platforms other than Google. I don't understand why. I mean, everyone should be using AdWords to advertise. But there are some people that use other tools like Bing and Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. So they advertise on those tools. And it's very, very easy to tag your campaigns so that you know when people are coming to the website through, for example, LinkedIn. So if you don't do that, it's really important. If you're building marketing campaigns, you should tag your links. So just look for a Google Analytics campaign tagging on Google. And but once you do that, and it's a very easy step, you will start learning what kind of things people coming from LinkedIn, for example, they're doing on the website, right? So how many people came to the website, what was the bounce rate, how long did they stay on the website, how much did they buy on the website, right? What was the revenue of this campaign? Now there is one really important thing missing, which is how much did it cost, right? Because if I don't know how much it cost, you know, it brought 50,000 pounds in revenue, but you know, if it costs 100,000 pounds, it's different from if it costs 5,000 pounds. So what we have on Google Analytics now is it's called cost data upload. So you can upload your cost data. That's exactly what you can do. So you just upload a table into Google Analytics that can enrich your campaigns. So it gives you a context on your marketing effort. So it's really important to change Google Analytics into a marketing optimization tool for all campaigns. And just to mention, of course, we have integration with Google AdWords, so that would be different. You don't have to upload anything. Now the last one, sharing. Sharing is caring, right? And so we just published a blog post on the Google Analytics blog with a few things that you can share on Google Analytics. And I think it's that's something that we believe it's really, really important, is to share data with your colleagues, and because that, you know, each person has a perspective, each person knows something about the company, and it's really important that everyone sees the data and knows what's happening. So we have a few things. I'm going through all of them, and then I won't get too deep into any of them, but so first one, segments. As I mentioned previously, the segment builder, you can build segments. So if you have, for example, you build a segment of people that came to the website, added something to a cart, and then left the website, and then came back to the website, you can build multiple visit segments. And then you have something really important, because you know you're building a segment that means something to people in your company. So you can share this segment with your colleagues. You just send them a link, and then they will see that on their Google Analytics account as well. Second one is dashboards. So if you build, you know, a nice dashboard you want to share with, you know, your manager or your colleagues, and so that they see the same data, they're tracking the same data as you know, on a daily basis, hopefully weekly basis. And third one is custom reports. So you can build on Google Analytics a custom report. So you have this table that you know, you can choose the dimensions that you want, and then the metrics that you want to see, those that are important to you. And you can share these so that people look at the same numbers as you. Goals. So when you have multiple views in your Google Analytics account, you can share goals so that you have the same goal defined in each of your views. So that's a very important thing as well. Now, custom channel groupings is something that you see on the multi-channel funnels. So you can see on Google Analytics, for example, that when people came to the website multiple times before conversion, so for example, they came through social, then through organic, and then through a paid campaign, you can see all the steps that brought people until they converted. So, and what you can do with custom channel groupings is, for example, you have different websites that you want to group them into a specific campaign, for example. So you could use channel groupings to do that, and then you can share with your colleagues as well for them to see the same data that you're seeing. And attribution models is something that I'm not going to talk too much about attribution models. It's a subject by itself, but basically attribution is about giving credit to campaigns that brought people to your website. So basically, if you advertise something and then people come to the website, and then they come back again in a few weeks using Google Organic, and then in a few weeks they come again using, you know, an email that you send to them, then you can use attribution to provide credit to each of those sources that brought people to the website. And you can create a custom attribution model that you can use based on what you know about your visitors and what and how which campaign added to a conversion. So some takeaways. First of all, create a process. So create something that is, that works for your company. There are multiple models, and you can find on Google search multiple models of that you can use for web analytics. Look at trends, don't look at data points. So when you look at the data, always look at, at least one of the rules of thumb that I like is looking at least 4 weeks. First of all, looking in weekly periods, because sometimes, there's a very big difference between middle of the week and end of the week. So always look at weeks. And I like the rule as well that look at 4 + 1, which means a little bit more than a month or a little bit more than a year. So 13 months or 5 weeks. Segment your customers. Of course, there are multiple ways to do that on Google Analytics, and you can create views, you can create custom dimensions, you can build a segment. So there are multiple ways, and try to segment every time that you log into Google Analytics. Then enrich your data. So I mentioned Google Analytics annotations, dimension widening, and cost data upload. Those are 3 ways that you can enrich data so that it will have more context for you to analyze. And sharing is caring. It's really important to share the data with your colleagues so that everyone in the organization knows, the startup knows about what's going on with the data, how is the company going. And thank you, and happy analyzing. Yes,
Is there
sure.
a question?